This is Writer Life, a podcast about writing, life, coffee and conversation with Rob and John Morgan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Writer Life. As you can see today, the episode is entitled Buying Happiness. And I'm going to take a look back to my past and compare it to today's modern society and the way in which we kind of look at everything that's around us and sit in judgment of it. I suppose I'm quite lucky in a sense that I've lived a pretty long life, and so I can reflect on over half a century now of changes to the society that I've grown up in. And I'm quite lucky that I still live in the same town that I did when I was a very young child. And so I've been able to see how life around just this one place that I live has changed so much over the years. In a sense, it's kind of strange as I look back on my life. I'm a part of Gen X, the generation of risk takers with the we don't give a fuck attitude, because we were pretty much all too busy living a really good life. And recently I saw a Facebook reel where a young Gen Z asked a Gen Xer why they felt that the old days were better than they are today. And his response made me really sit up and smile. His response was pretty simple. He just said, we were happier back then than people today because life was easier, and it was easier to be happy. Now, I cannot deny I have to agree. He went on to mention how it was, in his opinion, that the way the world had gone, people appear today to think they can only be happy if there's a large fee attached to it, and they have to spend or gain wealth. And I feel that he was right. I think the way I see it, the world of tech has to a degree now slipped into all of modern life, and just about everything is now reliant on technology. I mean, there's a bloody app for just about everything, which actually I find quite tedious and annoying at times. Our kids have now been raised on it, and it's found its way not only into our homes and our kids' bedrooms, but it's now in schools, shops, hospitals, and every single aspect of life, as we've grown more and more dependent on this one piece of handheld technology which we have this impulse to look at regularly and carry everywhere. And in a way, I think people are now missing out on life because they're too busy looking at a small screen. I still debate if the mobile phone is a good thing. I do feel concerned about how all of this technology is affecting us as social creatures. Because the human race, human beings are social animals. Most of our subconscious behavior is based on how we react to others, be it through conversation or visual stimulus. Interacting with other people face to face is actually a massively important aspect of who we are. And it goes to the root of us as human beings. But as technology infiltrates our lifestyles, we appear to have moved into a form of communication that is kind of more online based than actually based in real life, and lived one-on-one with a person. If you consider things, we're possibly more connected to each other now than ever before. Talking to one another can happen with the click of a button, no matter where in the world you are. And it should be a good thing. And yet, mental health issues such as depression is also at its highest ever in history. More people today feel alone, isolated and lonely. So with all this tech, why exactly is that? Too many people today are becoming isolated, sat alone at home for days on end, without actually seeing another living soul in person. Isolation has become a huge problem as we sit connected to our handheld or desktop devices, and I cannot help but compare that to my own youth, which was lived mainly outdoors and within our circles of friends. Interaction was a huge part of my youth, hanging out, having fun, and generally spending as much free time as possible with all of our groups of friends. We were pretty carefree. We loved life and lived simply, because in truth, back then, all of us were poor, but we just didn't realize it. The world has changed so much since the 1970s. The pre-internet days for me and my friends meant we had to create our own amusement, and times were also hard financially. We lived for the moment, had large circles of friends which would see us all hanging out in each other's houses or walking the streets and hanging out at our special meeting spots. Living in the northern part of the UK in the 1970s, people just did not have huge amounts of money. So for my generation, we really had to make the best of what we actually had. Most of us were teenagers with part-time jobs. We were either at school or in college. I had a paper round and I also worked on a few market stalls. I mean, wages back then, they were not that high. And for myself, most of my money was spent on music, which was the focus of my entire life. I bought vinyl records and cassette tapes, as did all of my friends. And so for us, sharing music was a common thing. And between us, we would share albums by swapping cassette tapes. I think to a degree it was a much simpler way of life. I mean, we were much calmer people. We certainly were more easygoing. We've been called the laid-back generation because our idea of fun was sitting in a group, swapping stories and playing music as we passed the time laughing and joking around. I think one of the most important aspects of my life back then was this strong sense of community and unity I had with those who surrounded me. Friendship was about loyalty, standing by each other and having each other's back. I suppose the term back then was gang, but it was nothing at all like what today's gangs are like, because we were not looking for trouble. If anything, we were just in it for the comradeship and a sense of belonging to something that actually mattered to us. I suppose in many ways our outlook was different. All we really wanted was, a good girlfriend, some great mates around us, and a life where we could be relaxed and happy and feel at ease. I talk a lot about life and the future. My main dream at that time was to find a woman, and a woman that I could love and really relate to, and maybe travel with her, take her to gigs, and wake up to her smile. The life I wanted was much simpler than today. It was certainly less complicated, and most importantly, it really was not that materialistic. Today, being poor is frowned upon. Back then, it was simply how life was, and we accepted that. In many ways, it drove us to strive for the few things that we needed, so we worked hard. All of us have been raised to have very strong working ethics, but I can say with a smile, none of us ever really expected to be rich. We knew where we fitted in. Society thought of the world much differently back then. None of us really had any delusions of fame or grandeur. Odd as it sounds, that was always for the other people, those who were rich. And we never saw ourselves as a part of that set. I was a typical youth. I was kind of faded and frayed, with a working class background. And honestly, I didn't really care about that. It didn't bother me in the slightest. I was happy, and that really was all that really mattered. we really didn't concern ourselves with fast cars and luxury houses. As boring as it probably sounds today, we were really content with the idea of having someone who loved us, who wanted to share our path and enjoy life with us in a simple place. I had my first flat. To me, that was like the coolest thing ever. It was dingy and it was grotty, but it was mine, and that's all I really cared about. I didn't have this delusion of grandeur with four-poster beds and, $1 million houses with big lush lawns and green estates. I was a working class kid, and I just wanted something very simplistic and very normal. I think some of this is actually reflected in Heirs to the Kingdom, in the relationship that I created with Robbie and Runestone. In many ways, kind of as I look back at the time of when I began writing the books, I often feel that their story reflects a lot of aspects of my own life in my younger days. Just like they did. I would spend a lot of time alone with my girlfriend and quietly talk, wrapped in our Afghan coats, snuggled up together, chuckling and talking of a simplistic and self-sufficient life. And that in itself was a very happy time for me. I show it in Heirs to the Kingdom as Robbie stands alone with Runestone, looking up at a large, old and ancient stone circle. She nuzzled into his neck. They had pretty much the same life as we have now. Like us, they live off the land. Yet, here it still stands. How many buildings have we seen that are broken and decayed and covered in weeds? The Red Death was a small passing moment in the span of time. These have been here. Isn't that weird, Runestone? What are you trying to tell me, Robbie? I don't know. It gives me hope, Room, that all of us can build something that will last for thousands of years as these have. Well, that's a dream worth having, Robbie. Grandmother would be pleased. He turned and slid his arms around her. But do you think my dream is stronger than his? Robbie, I've thought a lot about what Grandmother said. I just don't think it'll be about just the dream. I think that the love and the meaning of the dream have to count. Like, who benefits, and will our lives be fairly treated, and communities aided? Your dream is for the good of everyone. Mason's comes from the desire to benefit only him. Your dream has got to count, and it's got to be victorious. A simple life, living together on the land. I think as I sit back now and I look at this small passage from book 1, in a sense, back when I was writing the book, I saw it as more as the difference between the rich and the poor. The rich were driven to get more, and their greed drove them into a lust for yet more greed. And the poor simply wanted to just get by and do it with simplicity, and do it also with the person that they loved. Today, as I look at the world, it now feels to me like, to be more of a reflection of the past compared to the future. Because there's been a major shift in the way people today not only see life, but expect life to be. And it's most certainly not a poor life. Today's world is more about the money, the fame, and the glamour of being the centre of attention. But it's not all glitter and bright lights. Behind the scenes, there's a darkness that was not there when I was younger. Most ordinary people appeared to be content with their lives back then. Like everyone, there were struggles, but we all had a mindset to overcome them. The cost of living was nowhere near as expensive as it is today, and we were all experts at repairing the things that we owned. It's funny in a sense, because the Boomer and Gen X generations get a lot of flack from millennials and Gen Z about how we have ruined the planet. You know, I can remember Greta Thunberg and her famous "How dare you" speech, blaming us for stealing her childhood. But to be honest, our lives were far more sustainable than most of the people who are living today. It sounds crazy, but I can remember taking my mum's sherry bottles back to the shop to be refilled. You know, our milk bottles were actually washed and placed on the doorstep for the milkman to collect the following day. Our takeout was wrapped in old newspaper. We took our pop and beer bottles back to the shop and got a penny for them. We patched our clothing to make it last, repaired our own shoes, and most gardens contained a veg bed where we would grow all of our own food. You know, it's crazy. We lived in a world without plastic carrier bags. Most women had large woven shopping bags, and there was no such thing back then as a supermarket. We had main streets filled with shops that sold just about everything that we needed, from fresh bread, meat, fish, and even hardware. We walked everywhere, even to school. I mean, you think about it now. I mean, you know, when I was 5, I was walking to school on my own. I mean, that was just unheard of today. I mean, no one would allow it. It's crazy, you know, and because of all of it, you know, all of us were fit and we were healthy. You know, we didn't have gym subscriptions back then. I was raised on casseroles and stews. Sundays was baking day, where we filled old metal tins with freshly baked biscuits and cakes. My mum cooked absolutely everything from scratch. All of the ingredients were fresh from the shop that day. We had no microwaves or convenience foods, and our takeout was limited to sandwiches, pies, or the chip shop. There's no doubt food was healthier back then. It was not filled with chemicals or fake fillers for profit. And most importantly, our phone was connected to a wire, and it lived in our hallway. It makes me really smile as I remember sitting on the stairs talking to my girlfriend as my mum walked past, reminding me phones cost money and not to sit there all night. As my girlfriend would talk to me and stood in a phone box and telling me of her day and how much she missed me and could not wait until the weekend when we could see each other. I think the guy on the Facebook reel was right. Life was so much simpler then. And as a result, I think we were a lot happier, just living in the moment. I look at the world today and I think to myself, what the hell has happened? You know, where did it all go wrong? As I look back, I think that the trouble really began to grow from about the mid-late 1980s, with the deregulating of the bands and open access to easier credit. The crazy thing is that my generation saw money more as a tool than something that was desirable or to be worshipped. The truth is, we did not have a lot of money, and to a degree, we lived a good life with what little we had. It certainly was not something we bowed down to or prayed to and worshipped. As we moved into the millennium and past the year 2000, I think money became more important. The slogan, "Greed is good," appeared to rock through the streets of life, and people really started to change. Community became less important. What mattered was how well you were doing, and rather than help your neighbours as we did back in the 1970s, things started to turn ugly, and an attitude grew of beat your neighbour, which became, in a sense, the key to living. I often wonder if this was some sort of act of rebellion against the Gen X and Boomer generation by the millennials. Because, you know, did they resent the no-nonsense attitude and simple living of their parents? And so felt entitled and wanted more. I think the rise of the internet and social media has changed just about everything. I think in a sense it has rusted into society a sort of internal social decay. I remember the early days of MySpace and Facebook, which I was absolutely convinced I had to join early in 2008 by all of my friends. To be honest, at first I found it a strange and weird thing to be on. I had friends on my friends list that I knew in real life, only now I did not need to travel to see them. I just had to click a button to get all of the news on their daily life. Something else also became blatantly obvious as I looked at my screen. My friends were faking their lives. They would write all sorts of things that simply were not true. They certainly painted an image of themselves that was not real. The people on my screen were not the people I actually knew. They embellished everything to make themselves look better, richer, more successful, and far more important than they actually were. And boy, did they boast. Somehow we slipped into the world of technology, and our phones lost their wires and fixed position in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs, and they became handheld. I suppose at first, even for me, it felt pretty cool. You could put a phone in a pocket and walk around making calls just about anywhere. What was not to like about that? We all felt this was really, really useful. From the year 2000, for 10 years, technology just raced. New social media platforms appeared, and technology changed almost daily as devices shrank and PC desktops became laptops, which then morphed into tablets. The speed at which all of this developed also created something else, something a little bit more pervasive than I was used to, because it began with the rise of this kind of sense of superiority. People started to boast more and more as the tech, which was constantly improved and updated, came at a high price and began what is now seen as the must-have gadget generation. Communities became a huge game of keeping up with the Joneses. Everything became about how it looked, as social media became a fake front filled with manufactured posts that implied people were doing far better than they actually were. In a sense, it all felt like the rise of narcissism combined with money, which was quickly becoming the new god to be worshipped. People were no longer people in the age of the rise of the internet. A new buzzword appeared, and that was the word consumer. Social media became nothing more than one big promotional and advertising platform. Today there is nothing at all social about it. We're now human beings whose only worth is our ability to brag and pay for things, and it drove a boom that pushed people to the edge of debt, and all in the name of looking good on social media. And big business, to be honest, is absolutely loving it. Within all of this arose something equally as vile. As with all of this came the internet troll. People who took joy from being rude and offensive as they used weaponized shame and attacked out of nowhere. All of this slipped off the internet and off our screens and became normalized also within society. It became the driving force behind it, which was to attack people's looks and how much income they had. Society has been divided far more than it was in the days of my youth. Those who have rubbed the noses of those who have not in the dirt, and it has become almost a reflex action, as narcissism and bullying now walk hand in hand. It has become the decay that has seeped into everything, and is now the new measure of all things, as Gen Z embrace it with pure enthusiasm. For Gen Z, happiness comes at the press of a button I may add that's paid for by mummy and daddy. And if mummy and daddy don't, the tantrums will follow. The divide in society since those carefree days of the 1970s has actually been seismic. And today's world is a very, very different world. I've said many times to my wife I'd rather go back to the days of my youth, which were not perfect by any means, but they were at least more carefree and easygoing than today. There's a lot of hate in the world as the divide between those with and those without grows ever wider, and bullying and shaming really has taken its toll. The power of greed has, to a degree, unravelled the society I once knew, and business and the worship of celebrities walk hand in hand, admired and despised in equal proportion by those who are racked with envy. The rich are not content. They now feel more entitled than ever before to have it all, and they use the power that comes with the wealth to buy not only everything that they want, but also all of the politicians that can deliver it to them. Those with money look down and sneer on those without, and will move heaven and earth to get what they want, not because they deserve it, but simply because they do not own it. There are examples of this in everything I write, as I comment on society and show it for what it really is, which is entitled arrogance. I think one of the most obvious cases being that of Uncle Peter in Hans Cottage. My phone started to ring. I got up and walked over to the kitchen unit and picked it up. I saw the name lit up and gave a sigh. I answered and put it on speaker. "Emily, I thought I'd ring to see how you're doing." Shelley frowned. "I'm fine, Aunt Jess." "Oh, that's nice to hear. Listen, Peter's becoming concerned because he tells me you've not replied to his emails. You know, it's more than a fair offer." I carried the phone over to the sofa and sat down and lifted my coffee. "Yeah, it's a good price. The problem is I've told him about 50 times now. I don't need the money or wish to sell it." I could hear her sigh, and it sounded like someone else was there whispering in her ear. "Emily, you know, you've not been there since she died. What's the point of keeping it if you're not going to live there?" "I'm sorry, Aunt Jess, but who said I'm not going to live there? I may just not have gotten around to it yet. You know, I have been working." "Oh, Emily, it's almost been a year, for God's sake. I mean, honestly, if you're interested in living there, you'd already be in there by now. Look, I understand you were close to her. I really do. But wouldn't it be better if you just let Peter and myself clear it all out and then use the land for the benefit of more?" In the book, Emily's been left a substantial piece of virgin land. But from the moment she inherits it, her Uncle Peter becomes obsessed with buying it to develop it into a massive, lucrative site. Now, it matters not that the place is of great sentimental interest and deep meaning to Emily. Even though he is rich himself and owns a huge estate, he has to have more. And as the book shows, he literally will do anything he can to get it. Money changes people, and it's not always for the better. I've watched it with friends who got great jobs and did well. The presence of money in their pockets altered their state of mind, and it does not take long before they appear to have a different view of the world and start looking down on those less fortunate than themselves. It mattered not they grew up as poor as me. They changed, and they became condescending. I've worked with some really, really rich people, And I found that it's those with titles and a great deal of wealth, they appear to be far more humane and kind than those who inherit good amounts of money or have worked their way up. On the scale of things, financial, it appears to me that those who are in the higher end of the middle of the table, those who are well off but are not super rich, seem to be the worst kind of people when it comes to sitting in judgment of others. It is in this bracket you really find out who is the most snobbish and at heart not very nice. And we see this in the Curio Chronicles. I mean, she's a simple northern girl done good. Her parents are in the super rich bracket, and she inherits a lot of wealth on her 21st birthday. But she's also very grounded as she lives and works in the north of England. On the other side of the coin, Marjorie comes from a long line of wealthy people. Most of her inheritance has been in property, which she's sold for a very, very handsome profit. And as one of the richest people in her village, she looks down on everyone else. Abigail's father has done well in life. He earned his money the hard way, but he also earned it by taking advantage of the very rich. But with the combined wealth of his wife, Felicity, between them, they're more than comfortable. Edwin's nowhere near as rich as Marjorie, and she looks down on him. And so he's learned from her, and as a result, he looks down on everybody lower than him. It's a vicious cycle that has become a way of being, as we see in the books the lengths he will go to keep up the appearance of being much richer than he actually is. How it looks to Edwin is far more important than the reality of his position. And when it comes to his daughter and the reputation of others in the village, he'll do just about anything he can to protect his own image from being smeared. The following is something I wrote but I did not publish. I'd always thought that I would include it somewhere in the Curio Chronicles, maybe as a flashback, but I never really got the chance. So when Edwin's daughter tells her father that the choir master, a highly respected figure, tried to assault her, he actually sides with the choir master, not his own daughter. I could hear my father in my head as he recited what was such a familiar line and the dogma of my life. Abigail, it's important that people see and understand you are moral and upstanding. And that starts with being polite and showing respect. Sin is not moral, and we should endeavour to fight it always. What a hypocrite, just like the rest of them. I'd seen him with that woman, and he certainly was enjoying chewing on her face at the time, and yet he lectured me constantly. I gave a shudder as my voice spoke once again in my head. It's not true, Father. I'd never do that. Not in church. Honestly, I'd never do it. Martin's lying. Father, you have to believe me. He tried to take my knickers off. Father, please, I'm not lying. He pulled it out, and I could not get off the table, and he rubbed it on my lower parts. Father, please, I'm not lying. Liar! I shuddered as I remembered hitting the floor and smashing my face on the table. That awful picture of him, red in the face, leaning over me, screaming at me, was there again. How dare you say such things in this house? Martin's a respected man and a pillar of this community and church. How dare you soil his name with your filthy thoughts? I gave a jerk and breathed quickly. 2 large green eyes hovered in front of me. Dads, sweetie, are you all right? I snapped back to reality and blinked. I've heard so many people talk of how if they could only win the lottery or make it big somehow, that all of their problems would be solved. But the truth is, all money does is bring another set of problems. They're different from the ones that you may have as a poor person, but they are problems nonetheless. The status of a choirmaster in an affluent village is far more important than his own daughter's welfare to Edwin. Most people think abuse and neglect are problems of the poor, but they're not. Every single class suffers them. The caliber of a person has got nothing to do with what is in their bank account. You're either a good parent or a shitty parent, and no amount of money will ever change that. It's one of the reasons when writing the Curial Chronicles that I actually chose to write Abigail as the daughter of a rich family, because I wanted to show that the problems are all the same regardless of status. And so I placed her right in the heart of a village filled with rich and powerful people. Izzy verbalizes it very well as she walks with Birch and Dedley towards what will become a new therapy practice in the heart of Wootton Dursley. It took me some time to get ready and another 2 large coffees, but feeling alive and in black jeans and a long top, we all left the house and walked towards the village. Izzy was more than alert as she looked around the place. Wow, there's a lot of money here. So that is good. I glanced at her. Why is that good? She had a sly looking grin on her face. Oh, Dedley, my dear, everybody seeks money. But what I've found in my life is that those who get everything they want in life end up screwed up by it. You see, money creates a false sense of security, and you believe that you can then start getting away with just about anything. And that usually leads to chaos and instability. And for someone like me, that means clients. Yeah, it made some sort of sense to me. The people of Wootton, due to their mindset of keeping everything hidden behind closed doors, felt that they had the right to rule over anyone that they wanted. I mean, it was easy for them to pick up on other people's faults as they maintained their perfect image of a model villager. But as we see as the books unfold, all is not quite as decent as it seems. When Dedley breaks down, the truth starts to seep out of the cracks, and it reveals the real truth of what is actually happening behind the scenes. The villagers of Wootton Dursley spend their days taking their joy from the belittling of others. All of them are pitted against their neighbours, constantly fighting for a fake moral superiority so that they stay on top and dictate the terms of everyone else's lives. Are they happy? I would say not really, which is possibly why they use fear and hate to control others. Because deep down inside, they're actually the ones who are living in fear of being outed. Their money buys status, but they do not really glean any joy from it. They're simply caught in the day-to-day fight of maintaining the image that they fabricated on day one. And if you ask me, it's the most perfect reflection of today's social media obsessed society. How it looks is far more important than how it actually is. In the story of the Curial Chronicles, I also wanted to address some aspects of Debbie and Dedley as teenagers and then use them as flashbacks. And although there are actually a lot of references to Debs living in Oxendale on a council estate, I never quite got around to add in some of the things that I'd actually written. There is one piece that I have stored on file, which is the scene where Abigail gets to go to Debbie's house as a very young teenager, and her mother drops her off. And if you've read the books and understand the real truth of Felicity, you will see how even she embraced the attitude of the village just to fit in. And as a result, she ended up sitting in judgment of others. I was a rich kid, or at least seemed to be one, even though my dad was as tight as hell with his money and hated spending it. In a way, I was used to living simply, I did not have a huge bank account and I got an allowance, which it was more than Deb's, but not that much more. When her mother rang and asked my mum if I could sleep over, I was delighted and so excited. I'd never in my life been able to stay over anywhere, and I begged my mum to let me do it. It was a bank holiday weekend, and my mum was busy with the council, so she gave her consent, and I packed a bag and put on my best Avril gear, and Debs came to the house to collect me, although Mum insisted that she drove us. I was pretty excited as Mum dropped us off. She looked down the street and did appear not to be that keen. She looked up at me as I leaned down to look in through the door. "Abigail, are you certain you want to stay here all weekend? I'll understand if you want to come home. You can phone me anytime." I looked back at Debs. She looked nervous. I turned back to my mum and I smiled. "Mum, I'll be fine. Deb's mum is a care assistant. She's great and a really good mum. Relax, I'm going to be fine. I'll be hanging out mainly in her room. We've got stacks of movies to watch. She has the new Avril bootleg concert and I really want to see that." She still looked uncomfortable and leaned over the seat, lowering her voice. "Abigail, are you really sure? I'll not deny. Well, this place, to be honest, it looks unsavoury." I smirked. "Mum, don't be like that. Not everyone can live in Wootton. Debs is cool and well brought up. I'm going to be fine, so just go home, relax, enjoy yourself." She gave a sigh and sat up. "All right, but if you need me, I'll come right over." I shook my head as I closed the door. I was really excited. This was the first time in my life I'd been able to sleep over, and I was going to make the most of it. I shouldered my bag filled with all of my things and Avril CDs and smiled at Debs as I waved my mum, and she finally drove off down the street. "This is going to be so cool." Debs gave a slightly embarrassed smile. "Abby, I'm not sure your mum is happy. You know, we're not rich. My house is not posh like yours." I frowned as I looked at her. "What the hell, Debs? I'm not like that. I don't care what my mum says. I love your mum, and I don't care where you live. We are mates." She gave a soft nod. "Okay, Abby, just, don't expect too much." She was so silly at times, I didn't care. Hell, for me, this was the biggest adventure of my 13 years of life, and I was so excited as hell. I'd even done my eyes with black, although I did have to do them in the car, cause, my dad would have freaked out if he saw them. I had my black baggy pants on, tight Avril t-shirt and my black jacket, and with my long blonde straight hair, I had the look and felt cool. I grabbed her arm. "Okay, which one of yours?" She looked nervous. We're still 3 streets away." "I'm sorry, Abby, but I didn't want your mum seeing where I live. You might not think it, but she does look down on here. All of the people in your village do. They're rich. They don't have to live on an estate like I do. Honestly, Abby, I hate it." I shook my head. "You're bonkers, do you know that? Come on then, show me where your house is." Isn't it a shame that children are wiser than their parents? There are some who see money as the way to fix everything, including themselves. And yet, as I've seen throughout all of my life, all money does is build a false sense of security, and to a degree, arrogance. There's a meme on the internet that says, if you look at a person and you really want to judge what kind of a person they really are, just watch how they treat a waitress in a restaurant. God, when I saw that, I really got it. I've worked as a waiter, and some people who appear very affluent are absolutely horrible people. A few years back, someone treated me offhand and really rudely. until they found out that I was a writer and a published author, at which moment their entire attitude changed as they suddenly saw me as a person of value. 15 minutes prior they hadn't, and yet suddenly with that little magical title I became a respected person of society. In truth, it really pissed me off, because I should have been treated with respect in the first place. But because I suddenly have an acceptable tag, they changed in the way that they spoke to me. It's fake, and I hate it. And I cannot deny, I see it all of the time in today's world with its celebrity pandering and influencers, as everyone scrambles for glory and riches. I cannot help but notice those people are actually the ones who are the unhappiest, and behind their smiles there's a lot of sadness and darkness. Money and glory, if anything, has become the thing that is actually destroying them. Being a good person and showing respect has nothing to do with your following or your bank account. You're either a good person or a bad one, and you get to choose that every moment of every day, and it matters to everybody that you'll ever meet. Being happy is not influenced by money. It's influenced by who you are, how you feel, and those around you. Be you, and just appreciate each other. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in and listened to this episode today. I'm always grateful to know that there's someone out there with the headphones on having a listen, and I hope that some of the things I cover, and not only my commentary on society, but also the things that I write, I hope it just makes other people think and provides a smile along the way, because I do write a lot of stuff that makes people giggle. Reading is the most wonderful thing on the planet, and being a writer and being able to write stuff that other people can read, for me personally, is my joy in life. So if you've listened in and you've enjoyed it, I am exceptionally thankful, and hopefully next week I'll be able to put something else out. I've been very busy for the last couple of weeks, and being a publisher and a writer running my own tiny little company sometimes just drags me away, and I am working on new stuff which has occupied my thoughts for a while, and has kept me away from some of the other activities I get involved with, one of them being this podcast. So yeah, I'm back now and I'm writing new stuff for the next podcasts. And so if you enjoyed today, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll be back next week with something else to make you ponder the world around you. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Writer Life podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, or there are areas of Robin's stories you would like him to discuss, please add your thoughts and questions in the comments, and we will include them in a future episode. You can follow Robin on all his social media links, which you will find listed below, and please, like and subscribe to this channel, so you get the latest notifications when he posts. All Robin's books are available in digital and print formats to purchase or download through all online book sales sites.